What has been your scariest hiking experience? There's an old abandoned road behind my house that winds down the mountain beside the ski hills. It was abandoned because no one lived on it, and it was costing the town too much money to maintain it, but it's a cool spot to go hiking now. One day I was hiking down towards the river at the bottom of the road. It was full, so all the leaves were off, and it was very bright in the woods. I came around a corner to a section of the road that was washed out, so I was focusing more on my footing than my surroundings, but something caught my eye. I look up, and there's a cougar frozen in fear about 10 feet away from me. It was probably thinking the same thing I was. Holy f, now what do I do? So we just sit there staring at each other for a minute or two when suddenly a stick cracks behind me, which makes me jump, which scares the cougar. The thing scrambled to turn around and run just like a house cat and disappears into the trees. I turned around to see what made the noise, and it's a deer. A fucking deer scared off a cougar by just stepping on a stick. Granted, if I wasn't there to put the cougar on edge already, that deer would probably have been dead, and similarly, if that deer hadn't been there, the situation may not have ended as well for me. So we all survived based on sheer luck. A deer saved you from a cougar and scared it off? That's amazing. Maybe the cougar was after the deer the whole time and you got in the way of his meal. Cougars very rarely attack humans. It usually has to be provoked in some way. Of course there are exceptions, but generally, cougars are moderately harmless. If the cougar was intent on harming you, chances are you would never have seen it until it was already attacking you. I had a cougar openly stalk me while I was hunting once. It stayed roughly 50 yards away and followed me for 30 or 40 minutes until it just disappeared. Probably was just curious and eventually got bored and left. Oh dear. OMG, I love cougars. They are terrifying when you threaten them, but it's counteracted by the fact that they act like little tiny house cats when you spook them. Lost my balance and fell off the trail down a cliff. Broke my left ankle, dislocated my right shoulder and elbow. Came to when it started downpouring. Some kind of animal came and sniffed me, but I was face down. I must have startled it when I moaned trying to move, because it took off. I crawled down about 200 yards when I came to a trailhead. A park ranger saw me and radioed for help. She put my arm in a sling and stabilized my leg. Gave me some water. Airlifted to a hospital from there. Wow man. Sounds like that cold been way worse than it turned out. Glad you're doing okay. Thanks, brother. I had been on that trail several times before. I still don't know what caused me to slip. It's been about 7 years now. I go back every now and again. Glad you didn't let it ruin hiking for you permanently. My husband comes with me most days now. Every time I go off alone, I make positive someone knows where I am and why I'm going, to know how long it will take. Usually that means sharing my location with my parents or telling someone who sees me often where I'm going in passing conversation. I've had someone close to me die of a heart attack while living alone and seen too many stories of missing/dead hikers in the news, especially in Arizona in the summer. It doesn't hurt to let someone know and could save your life. I was going on an overpass hike in a small wooded valley that has lots of smaller connecting valleys coming off of it. I just crested one hill to find out a grass fire that I thought was small was huge and headed my way. I ended up having to run, and as I came to the edge it was about a 100-foot drop, so I was running parallel with the fire looking for a safe way to get down. I eventually got to a slope I could slide down and escape. Once I got to the bottom I found out the tarp I was carrying under my pack was actually melted a bit on one side. I left and did not spend the night. Why were you walking towards the fire, even if you thought it was small? Small fires are super common in some areas. If they are contained and the winds are predictable, then they aren't much of a threat. False. Still, why risk it? And to sleep near a fire? Asking for trouble. When I was about 7, one of the kids in my neighborhood had told me that he knew his way around the woods and hiking trails by my house. I was a kid and had nothing better to do that day, so I convinced my mom that we'd be fine. After all, my friend knew where we were going. I said we wouldn't go far and we'd be back in an hour or two, and then off we went. Spoiler alert, he did not actually know where the f he was going. We realized we were lost after a couple hours and the logical solution to 7-year-old us appeared to be to wander around and hope we got lucky and found the trailhead we came in through. We wandered for a few more hours, gradually losing hope as the sun began to set. I can remember being completely panicked and convinced I was never going to see my family again. Eventually, and luckily, we came across a guy who had been out for a sunset hike and he actually had a map and knew where he was going. He walked us back to the entrance by my house in the dark. I made it home safe to an angry mother who was about 5 seconds from calling the cops. On the one hand, she didn't have to call the cops, but if that was my mom, they'd have to call a coroner because she'd have killed me herself. I wish I was joking. I was hiking up a very steep foothill in Wastate when the dead log next to the trail started vibrating. I stopped like WTF, then the ground started to move. 7.0 earthquake incoming. The thing about earthquakes is you're just minding your own business and the one thing you take for granted, the solid ground beneath your feet starts moving. It's very surreal. I'm in the middle of the woods on a very steep trail. I don't know how big this earthquake is, the big one. I don't know how long it's going to last. I think it was maybe 30 seconds, but time went into slow motion. Right when it started getting really strong and branches and dead trees start coming down, it stopped, and I noped back down to my car. It was potentially pretty dangerous given where I was. I'm glad it stopped when it did. I live in the Midwest, in an area that is not at all earthquake prone, but apparently there is a very minor fault that briefly acted up a few years ago. I was laying on my bed reading The Hammer of the Guy with Two Dicks and suddenly my dog started barking. Then the windows started rattling and the whole house started swaying. All I could think was, "Goddammit, I don't want to go like this." The Hammer of the Guy with Two Dicks was my introduction to Reddit. Reddit has stayed on brand ever since. I was hiking down a trail in the dead of winter along a stream. At one point the trail narrowed to about 4 feet wide, with a steep slope on one side and a sheer drop of 10 feet to the creek on the other side. The trail was coated in a sheet of ice. Being cautious, I got down on all fours to crawl across the patch of ice. Not good enough. I felt my body sliding slowly towards the edge. I felt suspended in midair before I fell. It reminded me of Wally Coyote from the Roadrunner cartoons, when he looks at the camera and holds up a sign saying help, before plunging to the bottom of the cliff. On the way down, I managed to get my feet pointing down. I landed hard in the creek, making a huge splash. My legs acted as shock absorbers. I clawed my way up the bank, back to the trail, and limped the miles back to my car. I felt lucky to get out of that with just a pulled hamstring. I'll never forget that moment suspended in midair, where I thought I'm about to get really hurt. Same thing happened to me on a rope course. I got dropped by accident, and I just had a thought of, oh no, I'm going to fall here. Fell 20 feet, and broke my back. It's a miracle I can still walk. Was someone belaying you? Did you fall out of your harness? How did it happen? I was probably 4 years old in the dead of winter at my super rural childhood home. My dog, a large German shepherd, wandered off and I trusted him enough to follow him. My mom didn't see me leave the yard. I think she was cooking or something. Either way, following the dog wasn't the best idea. Once we got well out of sight, he stopped being in leader mode and went into protect mode. He just stuck with me and wouldn't take me out of the woods. I was too young to know to follow my footprints back or anything, and it was dangerously cold. I don't know how much time had passed, but my mom ended up calling emergency services. Cops and firefighters came out looking for me, and my dog almost mauled a cop that got too close to me. It wasn't scary at the time, but looking back, I could have easily died in those woods. Hey, this happened to me. I was about 1.5, went out into the woods behind our house in the middle of winter, and was followed and protected by our 1-year-old pup. I was missing for about an hour and my family was panicking, looking for me, when they found me curled up with the dog, sleeping. Sweet boy lived to be 14, before he crossed the Rainbow Bridge, and was the goodest. Wow, I couldn't even walk at 1.5. Most babies start walking at 12 months, but some take longer than others. My nephew is 18 months and started walking at 11 months. And the parents just let them toddle off. In winter no less. Something doesn't add up there. Yeah, my parents honestly weren't attentive, and at the time this happened, my dad was still states away selling off his business before moving up north to be with us. I have a large family and the siblings were made to babysit each other, so I'm not surprised. So many accidents happened growing up. I was on a multi-week trip hiking in northern New Mexico, with afternoon showers pretty much expected every day. It was about 75 to 80 degrees and sunny, but it very quickly turned to dark, rainy, and about 35 to 40 degrees. We were in a valley on the side of a flat top mountain, if that makes any sense. Our next campsite was over the top and below this mountain. Pretty soon lightning started striking nearby, so we had to assume the lightning position. We sat on our packs and tossed our hiking poles away. We weren't allowed to continue until the lighting was about 1.5 miles away. Pretty soon it kept getting closer and closer until I literally saw lightning strike about 200 feet away multiple times. We spent an hour and a half like this. And as it turns out, the zippers on my rain gear weren't waterproof. Never in my life have I felt the same level of what the hell am I doing here. Sounds like Film and Scout Ranch from how you described it. Sounds like my exact lightning experience there. It was a clear day, then out of nowhere we got absolutely hit by lightning on the top of the Tooth of Time and had to run down it, which was extremely dangerous. I had the same thought reading it.